Today I'm talking about the pandemic and the post-pandemic situation. Uh, Construction field is one of the worst affected. Of course, there are other fields also which are equally affected or more affected. Real estate might take a little bit more time to pick up. What has happened during the pandemic is going to have a long-term impact on the real estate field or architecture. We are so far concerned, we were thinking that health is a personal issue. We thought that we will be able to overcome the health issues with the so-called specialty hospitals and private hospitals, and with the health insurance companies we will be able to afford it. But with COVID it is clearly proven that health is a social issue and the community has to act. One of the things which I would like to make very clear is that conservation and development must go together. The architectural profession or the conservation profession, I will say it is an elitist profession. Only 1% of the population in India is able to afford. Even in the developed countries, the figure will not be very different. In India, less than 1% of the people get the services of an architect or a conservation professional. 99% of the people are not able to afford the fees or the professional charges that an architect is charging. With the COVID, the deurbanization process, I was one of the persons who have been arguing about deurbanization, that deurbanization is going to happen. At some point, cities will become unlivable. People have to migrate back to the villages, and with the COVID, this process will be hastened. Urbanization cannot continue the world, although 99.99% of the professionals believe that the urbanization is going to develop. Now the urbanization is 55% of the world's population live in cities. Most of the UN statistics and etc. say that by 2050 this will be increased to 70%. Father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi has said that India lies in its villages. But during the pandemic, we could see people fleeing from the cities towards the villages, towards the rural areas, towards their houses. I will say that the cities failed to give the security needed by the population. We find that the offices are being closed. Many of the IT companies plus many of the services companies are allowed work from home. Employees doesn't have to stay in the big cities, they can stay in their villages or in their farmhouses. The employers save a lot of money because they don't have to run the air conditioning, housekeeping, and TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, have publicly declared that they are going to continue this trend even if the pandemic is under control. It looks like a win-win situation for both the employees and employers as far as some of the professions are concerned. One of the things which is happening is that office space is becoming vacant. We need to find alternate uses for these office buildings because many of these buildings were badly designed and they are very expensive to maintain because of the air conditioning costs. I mean, there is IT buildings which needs power which is equivalent to a 1 megawatt power station. So all these things are going to suffer. So you have to find alternative uses for these buildings. What we have to understand very clearly, if people are migrated to cities for jobs, for increasing their income, their people are migrated from villages to cities for jobs, and they did not migrate for housing. They're quite comfortable with their houses in the city, even if it is a mud house they are living in slums to earn a daily living. And if this trend is going to change, then things are going to be very, very, very different. And what has happened in the last 2-3 decades? Many of the small towns and villages in India have been on decline. Infrastructure has not gone. Even if infrastructure has gone, I mean, people have neglected the housing in the rural areas. Even those rich people who are staying in the cities, who have an ancient, ancestral, historic building in the villages, did not bother to repair it or conserve it. And this is the trend which we have seen, because the money, the entire infrastructure, money, everything is being put in big cities. What has happened is that we have been neglecting the built heritage of these places. Now, with the work from home, with the employees returning back to the villages, and with the internet boom, Jio, thanks to Jio and all those big Airtel and all those companies, there is lesser living costs for people to live in the villages. So there are many people who live in villages, including some of my staff in villages. They are staying in the village for more than 6 months. They have vacated their houses in the city and gone back. And people returning back to the villages, returning back to their ancestral homes or the village, that is one big advantage. They can breathe pure air and drink fresh water, which is a rarity in our big cities. Delhi is so polluted. Some of the most polluted cities in the world is in India. So this has necessitated a fact that we have to conserve these ordinary buildings which are there in the villages. Necessitated this thing. And here there is a great opportunity for conservation architects to work, because most of these buildings happens to be buildings built 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. They are built with vernacular building materials, using like timber or lime or a brick or stone, which most of our engineers and architects do not learn in their 5-year or 4-year degree courses. In this situation, we have to see certain things. We should see how the architecture have been undergoing changes. Malls are being closed in USA. There was a study which showed that 21% of the malls in US were closed even before the pandemic. Already there was a trend in US where they were converting malls into clubs and offices and apartments. There were no takers for malls. I know there is a mall in Chennai city where 20 years ago everybody who came to the city used to go and visit the mall. No takers. Nobody goes there. The shopping has decreased quite a bit. A building has become obsolete in 20 years. And this is something which is a great opportunity for conservation specialists, conservation architects to look into this opportunity. And you have to see the trend. I just Googled shopping malls dying in US, and you can see 25% of the malls are set to shut down within 5 years. And we are still building malls. So we have to see the trend. And with the pandemic, online business has picked up. You don't require malls. You require godowns in different cities, in smaller towns, because online business has to pick up. The nature of the business undergone changes. The retail business is dying in a big way. And if you just Google YouTube with the same title, why US malls are disappearing. So this is a very, very usual trend. Reasons why malls across the US are closing down more than ever. Let me tell you once again, this was a trend even before the pandemic. So the society is changing, culture is changing, the way people do shopping is changing with the Amazon and Flipkart and Snapdeal. Retail business has come down. Now showroom people are running the business with lesser people. They are trying to show the features of the car online. Huge job losses are going to happen. Already job losses has happened in the city. And it's very difficult to survive in a city without a job. But in a village, you will still be able to manage to some extent. And as I said earlier, with the work from home tendency happening, and the IT companies are so happy. Some of our clients are also there. We are also remodeling some of the IT spaces now as part of my office work. They are cutting down the number. Earlier, they used to come, we want so many people fixed in so many square feet. Now, let us have 30% less staff, but let it be a much more comfortable. So the trends in office spaces are undergoing changes. All these vacant office spaces will have to undergo major changes. Museums are being closed down now, but we hope they will be occupied. Tourism sector is badly affected, one of the very badly affected. More than 100 million jobs are at risk. But what we have to understand is that if there is no tourism, there is no conservation, because our conservation industry is dependent on tourism. All our heritage hotels, all our cities are being funded by the tourism departments, not by the culture department, not by Archaeological Survey of India. So we have built our conservation models based on the tourism models, which I think might be a mistake. Of course, there is a prediction that tourism industry will boom after, because people are all closed down in their homes. So as soon as the pandemic and the people gets vaccinated, there is pre-vaccine booms as well as the post-vaccine boom in tourism, which might happen. This is what tourism industry people are predicting after this thing, after the lockdown. People will get out of the homes, but it is again the people who can afford to travel to these tourist places. Again, the upper middle class and the upper class and the people who will be able to travel. But there will be a major change in the way the industry is going to function. Tourism will redefine itself. Concrete buildings and its conservation is one of the major future hopes, because most of the buildings constructed, if you require, there was a report 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago in Bombay, so one of the buildings has collapsed. Bad repair, of course. In Bombay, there is a statistics is once in 4 days a building is collapsed, and many of the buildings are built with concrete. You need a technology. Nobody is talking about how to repair a concrete building. And it's unfortunately even this Indian conservation institutions are not teaching this aspect. Recently, some of the projects, we do 50% of our projects is conservation. We have got involved in concrete conservation because many of the buildings which comes to us has to look at that. Build reinforcement, getting corroded beyond the limit, leakage of the roofs. There are so many other things we had to see, and many of the buildings, just like I said, shopping mall which was built 20 years ago becoming obsolete. Office building become obsolete because they are not able to find the tenants. Shoppers wants to go only to the new shopping malls. What is happening to the old shopping malls? So you have to develop an expert. The profession should look at conserving the modern concrete buildings in a big way. Unlike most of the other disasters, pandemic has affected the developed countries or the richer countries as well as the developing countries as well, which are the poor countries, which is one very unusual thing. Pollution doesn't affect the developed countries. Their cities are clean. Pollution is a problem which is there in the developing countries and third world countries. I mean, of course, there are disasters happening in America, hurricane coming there or the earthquakes happening there, but the damage is much more serious in the developing countries because they do proper disaster management. So, under this thing, we have to look towards nature. We have to stop exploiting nature. And when we look at nature, we use the word exploiting. When exploiting is considered to be a bad word, but we very often use the word exploiting nature. When we say exploiting children, it's considered bad. Exploiting labor, it's considered bad. But exploiting nature is something which is good. So we have to look at this thing in a very different way. Ecology and architecture are very much related. The days are ahead where we have to look at ecology. Architects have never tried to look at ecology. And now there is a new thinking which has happened in the last few years. There are some thinkers who are arguing that ecology, they're trying to bring out the importance of how to ecology and architecture is to be linked. And I should say that most of these thinkers, unfortunately, are not architects or engineers. We have not started thinking about architecture and ecology. But biodiversity has to become the buzzword. We have to look at nature in a different way. You have to understand that without nature, there is no architecture. It's a very, very serious situation that we are making. Climate change is happening. Climate change and conservation is very linked. Heritage is a tool for development. Everybody starts saying it. It has to be seen as a development practice. I think conservation of the built heritage is the next stage of development. I think there is a tremendous scope for it. So we can't build new buildings anymore. Situation is so bad. I mean, we are adding to the global warming and climate change. And when we conserve a building, we are recycling the whole building, which is the best thing which we can do. We use less amount of materials, we use more labor, and we contribute much less to the global warming tendency. This is very, very important. And I think we should construct new buildings to the minimum, which should be the future. It's a very difficult thinking to say that new buildings should be the minimum. Unless absolutely necessary, we should put a moratorium on buildings. But it is not going to happen. I don't have any hope that it is going to happen. If we can put a hope, just like we put the lockdown, the government of India decided to have lockdown, affecting the economy of the country, affecting so many people. So many people lost jobs. Of course, the government tried to give so many free gifts to them. But still, unless we take such a thing, the problem is around the corner. It's high time that the government starts looking at climate change, global warming, and sea level rise at the earliest. One of the studies in US has shown that 36 million people in India will face coastal flooding threats in 20 years. Already it is happening. Floods have become common. Kerala, Kuttanad, which is a flood area where people are saying floods used to happen once in a year or once in 2 years. Now in this May summer month, 2 floods or 3 floods have happened. So coastal flooding threats have been predicted by thousands of climate scientists. I'm not talking about one person predicting it. It's not me who is predicting it. So many climate scientists have predicted that the disasters are going to be increased. They have shown by statistics that how it is increasing year by year. And when we say 36 million people in India will face coastal flooding threats, it is 31 million more than the previous assessment. What they said by 2100 there will be a sea level rise of 1 meter. Now many scientists predict 2 meters, 2.1 meters by 2100, which is 80 years from now. So a child who is born now will face to see 2.1 meter level in sea level rise. And it's not just going to rise by 2099. No, it is going to be progressive. Sea level is already rising with the glaciers and all these things melting. Our coastal cities will look different from now. 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, it will look different. What we require is not disaster management. We need to build disaster resilience, and that should become of prime importance. I'm trying to use this word because the prevention of disasters is not going to happen. When 1994 the Kyoto Protocol was signed by most of the countries in the world, we thought that we will be able to control the climate change, we thought that we will be able to control the global warming, but never happened. Situation has gone, and last climate interpanel governmental on climate change in their meeting, they suggested that we have another 12 more years. If we don't solve the problem of climate change in 12 years, we have to face the worst. And in this situation is what I will say, we should find opportunity. Conservation has a great role to play in this thing. Look at this, because there will be no course in India which will look at disaster management or risk assessment or anything in India. No course teaches it, or most of the courses don't teach it. But conservation, I think risk assessment has become part of the agenda of the conservation architects. I am 100% sure that the future people will describe pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. The social life of the cities are going to change. The cultural life of the cities are going to change. There is no doubt about it. Our society is changing so fast with all these transformations which is happening. Domestic level, so many changes which all you have been seeing it. All these changes which is happening, which is there. So the sociology of the cities, sociology of these changes, the culture of these changes, we have to study. There are more studies which has to come. The only thing I want to say, I want to conclude, this is our heritage. Let us conserve it for the future generations. And this is the strategy that we should be adopting to get into the next 2 or 3 decades of dealing with the built environment. And this is the only strategy. If we disregard the strategy, the disaster will be around the corner in a much more aggressive manner. Thank you.